I was worried for a second there when you were saying, you know, people shouldn't be coming here to listen and just absorb information. I think, where are you going with this? I promise you there will be some interesting things we talk about, and you're more than welcome to sit and listen. And if you are interested in getting involved, then please do. So it'll be a bit of an interactive session. Could my guests come and join us on the stage, and we'll do an intro to everyone once you're up on the stage. So great, come and join us. Thank you very much. Come on.
Thanks.
Great. Oh, Michael. Hello there. Great. Thank you very much. Right. Well, let's sit down. So today we're going to talk to you about RCS. We, as Mobile Ecosystem Forum, we actually run quite a number of what we call RCS or RBM roundtables with operators, really about helping to unblock the rollout of RCS in a given region. And part of those conversations is really talking about all the things that work, the good things, but also the things that you know, perhaps are more of a challenge, the learns. And so today it was really a great opportunity working with Infobip, and as you can see, we've got a great selection of guests. So we'll do some intros in a moment. We're going to talk to you about some of the learns that we've had about RCS, what works, what are some of the great success stories that we're starting to see come out, and we've got a whole bunch of information for you today. So should we start at this end? And Kim, go on, introduce.
Kim Johal, Senior Sales Manager at Infobip. I generally look after sort of the enterprise relationships, understand the sort of business challenges, and then trying to position what the best solution is around that.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Catherine Maguire from BTE, and I'm responsible for the rollout of RBM for the EEBT network, but I also work very closely with my colleagues from the other networks and the aggregator community to look at opportunities for RCS on the enterprise side and adoption in the UK.
Lovely, thank you.
Hi, I'm Claudine Bell. I'm from Virgin Media O2, Partner Business Manager on the Wholesale Commerce side, so all of the messaging.
So yeah, I'm Dave Boddington, Product Manager for RBM and GBM actually at Infobip, so I work closely with everyone on the panel to try and make it live.
Thank you. And Tim.
And Tim Atkinson, I'm Business Development at Google. So I work very closely with our carrier partners in the UK and other countries around Europe, and obviously support our team that work with our channel partners, Infobip being one of them.
Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Right, well, let's start with how we maximize RBM reach. I think, Kim, is it right if I hand over to you? We've got a bit of a presentation. Here we go. We've got the clicker here. Look at this. Okay. Let's see how that works. Does that come up on the screen?
Yeah,
it has. It's right there.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I was checking it was.
I better take control.
Yeah, I think it's it. We've reached the limit of my technical capabilities.
Susan said, "Don't look behind us."
Yes.
Feels like an interrogation.
Yeah, it was very bright.
Okay. You know, if it's okay,
Yeah, really good.
Right. Okay, so when we're talking about RBM, the ecosystem of messaging, we've got to look at a number of different factors. One is we've got the brands, the platforms, the partners, and then on the flip side, we've got the actual end users. So how do we bring those two together? Firstly, we've got the carriers who can actually enable RBM, which is great. But then we've also got a challenge of how can those brands connect to those operators and platforms themselves. So what we're trying to do here is look at how we can simplify the process. So this is where CPaaS providers such as Infobip come in. We try to take away the complexity and offer a simple single API. And that's pretty much trying to drive the customer communication into the ecosystem. And that's pretty much where the experience is built and designed. The output, which Julian touched on earlier, is out through the channel of choice, which is true omni-channel. In this case, we're talking about RBM, which is great. One of the things is RCS has been about for a while now. It's available, you know, pretty much on every Android handset. But the problem is that from a business perspective, there is still a gap in the marketplace itself. So it's how we basically solve that. So one of the drivers for this is we've got to look at how we can increase the actual carrier adoption. So the networks themselves, I mean, obviously we're quite well versed and set up here in the UK, but actually, you know, the brands that you work with are work on an international landscape. So you've pretty much got to scale at a level that basically meets their needs themselves. So, you know, it ties in quite nicely with the MNOs and also Google, etc., trying to drive that adoption further afield itself. I'm going to hand over to Tim.
That's me next. Yeah, I can't remember the order. Yeah, so from a Google perspective, as Kim was saying, RCS has been around for a while. It's been around in several different guises, created, I think it's like 2010, I think it was started, or 2007. Google got involved in this in about 2017, so about 5-6 years ago. We were asked by the carrier community and GSMA if we would be interested in supporting the development of carrier messaging. We adopted the RCS protocol and created with the GSMA the universal profile, which is obviously the standard that everybody uses. Since then, we've worked incredibly hard, working with both the OEMs, so the Android OEMs, to make sure that there is out of the box a messages application on the phone which is RCS ready. And then we've been working with the carriers all around the world to make sure that RCS capability is there for P2P communication with their subscribers, but also so they can terminate RBM messages and business messages across the RCS channel. And there's a few sort of statistics on the screen you can see in front of you. So we have the largest deployment of RCS around the world. The majority of carriers are using the Google's service, which we provide. Where carriers aren't involved, we actually provide what we term as guest cloud. So if you're an Android user anywhere in the world, apart from a few markets such as China, they do have their own RCS service. China, Iran, and a couple of others where we're not operating. When you switch on your messaging application, you will be asked if you want to use chat services. So chat services is what we refer to as RCS for the Android user. They don't know what RCS is, it's just chat services. And then obviously we have agreements in place and partnerships all around the world with carriers who are either using our infrastructure, or on the odd occasion we've actually connected in a third-party service that's already running. So that's up and going. We've got a lot of RBM users reachable. So we've got over 600 million that have got RBM capable to them. I'll make it clear that RBM isn't available in every country in the world at the moment. We have 12 key markets that we're working with partners in and around the world. Those key ones in the in Europe are France, Spain, and the UK. And we've got Brazil and Mexico. We've got those countries, plus a few others, we've got full saturation. So we call them market complete. That means you can reach the whole, any Android user in those markets. If they've got RCS switched on, you'll be able to reach them. And all the carriers are either involved or Google have stepped in to make sure those messages get terminated. And this list will grow as we go through 2023. We've got Scandinavia, which is lighting up. You can see on the slide here, we've got, I think, pretty much all the brands that are offering RBM today. There might be one or two missing, so apologies if they are, but they should all be there. So we've been doing a lot working with the ecosystem to make sure this is enabled. And just to be very clear on this isn't Google's service. This is a carrier service which Google are working with the carriers and the wider ecosystem to make sure it's up and running and enabled. So that's where we are in terms of the reach stuff. As I mentioned before, we've got fully enabled markets. As of last month, these are the ones that are fully enabled. So if you're an aggregator or a brand in these countries, you can access your customers across all of the carriers. So there's no one carrier subscriber that won't be reachable. They're all there. As I said, we do have other carriers that have turned on RBM, and those countries will become full market complete in 2023, and we'll continue getting that, making sure that's updated. If you are an RBM developer, i.e. you use our RBM platform, you can actually see in your console where you can terminate messages. So you can see the countries and you can see the carriers that are available there. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about kind of with reach, sort of just extending on from reach, is the messaging models that we have, because this is a really key thing. Somebody made a comment this morning of something like SMS is irrelevant now or something. SMS is not irrelevant now. SMS is very relevant, and we use that as a foundation for RCS. So we're basically developing or enriching that native messaging application, a messaging service which comes in a mobile phone. Obviously, it's a carrier-provided service. We have these three different models. The first one I want to talk about is basic message. Really important, this. If you're going to send an SMS, which is 160 characters or less, you can send it across the RBM platform as a text message, but it goes over RBM, and you get the benefits of having read and delivery receipts. You've got full verification and branding in there. So it gives you more value than a traditional SMS would do. And that is priced from a pricing perspective the same as SMS. So it won't cost you any more or any less to send that message, but you get additional benefit on that. And the carriers are all supporting this as well. So we're looking to see a transition from SMS into RBM. We have this on-ramp, as we call it, by means of basic message. And then we move into single message and conversations, which is much richer messaging. So you want to send a campaign out, you want people to scroll through your catalogue of goods and services, you can do that. A single message is just that, a single message. You can send that out, you can deliver some information to someone that might offboard them to an app, it might get them into a web page, or they might continue a conversation where they actually have an interaction with your brand. Conversational commerce is a phrase, I think it was coined by LivePerson a few years ago. We use that quite a lot, so you can have that conversation and complete the task or the purchase, whatever you're doing, actually in the messaging application. You can make payments and all those things. So these are the three messaging types. And this, I wanted to put it in there because it kind of completes the reach thing, if you see what I mean. We've got the reach there, we've got the handsets, we've got the network out with the carriers around the world, and we've got these messaging models which are there. They're kind of standardized now. They've been worked on with the carrier community and the GSMA and others over the years, and this is where we are today. Obviously, the pricing is dependent on how the carriers and the aggregators want to price it out into the market. We don't get involved with that, but everything should be there now for this to become a success. There's a few developments we're making. We take input all the time from our partners, and we make tweaks and we improve and develop things to make sure that we can make this as frictionless and as easy as possible for everybody to use. I think that was my lot. Well, just to say, my last slide here. In terms of the metrics, last month we saw coming up towards 1.5 billion messages, RBM messages sent. And bear in mind, that's only across those 12 markets you saw, so it's not a global thing. It's quite an impressive, we believe, quite an impressive growth that we've been seeing. There is tons and tons of headroom to go with this. As I said, we start onboarding SMS into basic messaging. We should see these volumes really, really pick up speed as we go into 2023. So, you know, things are in place, the plumbing's there, we can get going with it, and, you know, we're there. Google will continue to support the community, the ecosystem in 2023 and well beyond.
Fantastic.
And in terms of extending the market reach,
Mm-hmm.
is the focus on those markets where it's partial, making sure they're complete, or reaching out into other markets to increase, even if it's partial in other markets in other regions?
I mean, what we've generally been doing is we have these 12 markets, which I talked about there. We want to see those become successful. They've been kind of largely driven by the carrier community wanting to get RBM going. We filled a couple of gaps in some of those markets, such as in France, where Free Mobile aren't participating, but we make sure the messages are terminated. In terms of extending it out, as I say, in Scandinavia, Telia, Tele2, Telenor are coming on board, and others who are all doing RBM. We will light those countries up and fill those gaps where necessary. We kind of look at this on a regular basis and look to see where we want to expand it out. But we really want to see sort of success in these 12 key markets going into next year, and things will start to, you know, flow out from there.
Feels like a game of risk.
A little bit, yeah. But just to be very clear, it's very much carrier driven. So this isn't Google saying, hey, we're going to turn on RBM or RCS business messaging around the world. The carriers say, we want it in our market. Can we use your platform? Can we get going with it? And we're like, yes. And then we help to make sure that we've got full market reach.
Are you finding that there's some that's also driven by that localized population's willingness to use messaging? Is there some difference in? Because you know, as an example, LATAM would largely be seen as quite a strong area for messaging. Is that because the human element to it, or is it because the carriers have all worked together? Or
I think it's a bit of both. You know, as we know, it's been said dozens of times over the last couple of days. You know, messaging is a great platform. Consumers we all like using it. We chat to our friends. People are chatting to each other now in the room. Just fine, by the way. We don't mind. We like speaking to. I've had some great experience with Sky. Not unfortunately using RBM at the moment, but using SMS where I've had a problem. I've had an SMS from them. I can go off and find a bit of information and send it back to them and just have this async conversation. It's much better than hanging on an IVR or waiting on the phone and trying to do it all in one go. So we know that the acceptance is there by the users, and obviously we can see WhatsApp's taking advantage of this as well. But yes, the carriers are very much, we want to grow. There's things that carriers want to do. They want to grow their revenue. They want to provide a safer experience to their subscribers. Yeah. And that's where RBM really shows its power with the verification. And we've getting rid of all the spam and all those kind of things out of SMS. So it's really, you know, they want to be doing this and developing it. I mean, really, it's about time we developed SMS. It's been around for 28 years or whatever it is. You know, it needs to kind of take on its new guys, and this is where we are with it.
Well, I mean, you just hit on another interesting point there with the phrase SMS and RCS or RBM. I know one of the things when I talk to friends and family about it, they're often, well, what is that? how are we looking at tackling that from a branding perspective, or are we, or are we? Do we need to make sure the world understands what RCS is, or do we need to change how we brand it, or what's your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, we don't talk about RCS really to the end user. It's not a sort of a consumable term, if you like. If you've got your Android phone and RCS is enabled in your messages client, or if you've got an older Samsung phone in the Samsung client, you will see a little piece that comes up as chat. So if SMS is not available, or if chat or RCS is not available between you and the other party, you'll see text messaging or maybe SMS. And if it is, you see chat. So that's how we label it within the application. And obviously we have messages. One of the big things we've been working on, Messages is the app. The big thing we've been working on over the past few years is to remove fragmentation as much as possible. We know why WhatsApp's been really successful, because they have one app that looks the same on whatever phone you have it on, and the experience is the same on whatever phone you have it on. And we know that's been a key part of their success, of getting that 2 or so billion users out there. And we're doing the same with messaging. So it's messages from Google, whatever you want to call it. We're not highlighting the Google bit. It's a messages application. It's native on the phone. It's out of the box and it's ready to go.
That's an interesting question, actually. I remember seeing Nick's stats yesterday in terms of consumers who've been contacted by brands, and I think RBM was maybe about single figure percentage versus SMS. I wonder how many of those consumers, if it was asked as RCS RBM, well, particularly a basic message, well, that's just a text, so it's SMS. So I wonder how that skews that data for sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Oh.
Yeah, I was just going to come in on it because on the enterprise side in BT, we do talk to brands as well. And I do think sometimes that we could do a bit of work surrounding the marketing for the product and messaging generally, because obviously everybody's interacting with it all, an SMS on a daily basis, especially with business communications. And when you do talk to the brands, they all know what WhatsApp is. So it resonates with them a bit more clearly. If you say RBM or messaging, they're not quite as sure, but what we were talking about in our GSMA, all MNO UK group, is that maybe doing some work next year about the power of messaging and using the same hashtag across like the different carriers, perhaps, just because we see a lot of WhatsApp campaigns, about the power of messaging through them, but talk about carrier communications and how important it is to our daily lives, things like the NHS, Royal Mail, things like that, and pushing that and bring it more into the public consciousness. Yeah. And then hopefully that will trickle down to enterprise conversations for awareness. So it is definitely something on our side that we think we could do a bit of work on. But I think for the main consumer, it's just within their Android native inbox, so they're not going to be thinking about the name of it or the industry terms surrounding it. Yeah. But it's just the awareness bit could be a bit better, I think, with enterprises.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I mean, that leads us actually on to what we're looking to do around adding in RCS part of the mobile messaging mix, some of the use cases. I think maybe let's sort of move on to that, and actually, so we understand how consumers are going to get it. What are we going to give them?
Yeah, I will skip on very quickly just to talk about these points just before.
Yeah, sure.
If you want to talk about just kind of the work being done to expand the ecosystem on the brand and the client side.
Yeah, definitely. So from a brand perspective, what we're looking to do is, firstly, we've got obviously the direct relationships Infobip has with enterprise clients. So we're obviously understanding what verticals are in, what challenges they face, and putting forward suggested approaches as to how they can tackle those particular issues themselves. Those are direct relationships. So from a CPaaS provider and tier one type of connection with the networks and Google itself, that's not a capture all. So we know we've got indirect clients as well, which if you go on to the next slide, will pretty much mean that there's actually a gap. We've got to look at how we can basically build out the ecosystem that every tier 2, tier 3 provider, whether it's an aggregator, has the opportunity to basically present RCS, RBM, SMS 2.0 to their actual enterprise clients or SMB type clients themselves. So the approach is that there's actually a group which Catherine's just mentioned, which is made up of the MNOs, Google, and the tier 1 providers, and as a collective, it's looking at the value of RBM itself. I mean, we all know the verified tick is a massive value piece, but there is still a risk for the tier 2, tier 3, which is the exposure because of the verification process. So the plan is, how can we basically make it possible for the indirect clients to get access to this without the actual exposure to the tier 1 groups? And this is what the group as a collective are looking to tackle, basically.
It sounds like a complexity where Is it similar to the whole buying a certificate for your website? We need to make that as scalable for RBM brand verification as it is for going and making your website secure.
Yeah, I mean, you could say so. I think it's basically having a full tier of basically partners which have got the verification in place. I mean, this is the deeper dive conversation is pretty much what's happening at the moment, and how it's going to be made up and formed. But yeah, in essence, it's having that trust in each moving part of the actual offering itself.
The importance is making sure we can scale the ecosystem back to increase number of clients without losing the importance of the verification. So that degree of transparency that allows that, which maybe you don't get with other channels such as SMS, with the interconnectivity between on both aggregator side and on carrier side.
So you're basically, how can we make verification and make this available to every messaging provider, even if it's your small, localized, regional provider? Again, how do we streamline that? Yeah. Fantastic.
And I think there's a short-term answer to that one, which we're sort of looking at within that group, and we've come to a conclusion, and it's just been a bit of a tweak to some of the brand verification forms. But in the long term, I think there's definitely a way that we need to formalize brand verification for RBM as it starts to scale, and that's something that we're looking at within that group as well. I think it's really important, so we obviously want to keep the channel successful but also clean, but we just need to get the balance right there and ensure that brands don't find it too difficult to onboard, but also it's spam free.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? I mean, we've seen regions where perhaps the traffic wasn't managed, and we've walked to the extent of having to shut them down even. I think it's so critical that we keep the channels clear and free of spam and malicious use. It's very important.
Would be the way it is now for the UK brand verification process, there was a very, very slim, I'll probably come back to haunt me, but there's a very slim chance of any, spam because of the way we verify the campaigns, and that's why we want to keep it, it's minimal. So
I mean, the key thing is you guys are all sat here, we've got BT, we've got O2, we've got Google sat here, and as a collective, it's the experts pretty much discussing how they're going to solve this problem. And if we can roll this out globally and other regions start following suit, that's going to basically roll out our RBM quite quickly on a global landscape.
Well, I'm conscious of time because I know we are running late and we're on it. So what I think, let's move on to really how the title, RBM as part of the mobile messaging mix. Dave, do you want to give us if it moves? Oh yeah,
It's up.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly that. So how we talked part one about how we can increase the ecosystem, but then of course how we can maximise the opportunity that reach gives us. So the first part, looking at how we can use, as I say, RBM as part of the mobile messaging mix, and I think we don't need to talk at length about what RBM is, or RCS is. The slides are out there. We know that it's done, but we know it's got proven effectiveness. So we know that it has higher response, higher engagement, higher conversion. This is actually a case study that was, I think, approved actually just this week in France, which has shown some really positive comparison of RBM versus both SMS and email. So this was with the life insurance department at Maguire group in France, which was, I say, it's a really strong case study. And there's a building body of case studies, not just from ourselves, but from other aggregators and partners in the ecosystem. So we could talk about those at kind of ad infinitum. But one of the challenges is how we address the concerns and some of the limitations that we all know, and we don't want those to be an elephant in the room. So we need to be prepared to talk about RBM alongside other channels, and actually maybe not talk about channels. Maybe the channel is mobile. I think it's come up in a couple of times in a couple of talks. Brands maybe don't necessarily care if it's RBM or if it's WhatsApp or if it's GBM or A and B. They care about the message they're trying to share with the consumer. And same way on the consumer, they want to receive that message and be able to articulate and communicate with the brands in the right way. So how do we make sure we enable that and obfuscate the channel? And maybe the communication becomes about rich messaging, rich mobile messaging, mobile as a channel, but using the right channel in the most appropriate way.
So this sounds like the omni-channel dream that we've been talking about for a few years.
It does. Yeah. I mean, it was very interesting. Kind of the sessions earlier today. We had a real dichotomy there of the chat from Julian talking about omni-channel, in his kind of purest ideal form is where we want it to be, as you touched on. And then the WhatsApp discussion, which is much more actually kind of closed shop. It's pushing many things into a single app as opposed to multiple apps. And it's interesting to see where the market's going to take that, but also where the consumers are going to take that, how they're going to want to manage their purchases, managing their complaints, managing their customer service, manage their accounts. But absolutely right. Channels aren't necessarily the thing that either the brands should know about or consumers should know about.
It's the trust of the channel as well. It's the consumer having the ability to make their own decision about how they're communicated with in a way that they feel is trusted. So the blue tick on the verified thing is something they'll be familiar with from Twitter, from Instagram, and like people keep repeating on this panel, I'm going to say it again. No, they don't care. They don't care if it's called RCS or SMS or messaging or whatever it's called. It's just that ability to say, I like to communicate socially on this channel, but actually with this particular brand, I want to be able to communicate in my native app, but still know that's a trusted communication. So that blue tick, I think, as it comes out into the marketplace and consumers get used to seeing that, it would be something that feels familiar, unlike RCS as a sort of term.
Are you seeing brands or organisations you speak to when they know that there's a blue tick and there's verification? Are they more inclined to do use cases that perhaps they had to steer away from? Are you finding it's opening the door to the example being a bank and sending a link? Almost a no-no on the SMS channel. Are you finding that brands are finding that there's a bit of a change in what they can do, or are you in the use case?
I think, I'm going to sort of defer to Infobip on that one because we're VMO2 or a wholesale channel.
So it's an interesting question. I think you've got to be careful. You've got to learn to walk before you can run. So I don't see brands will be pushing out instantly to try and change the landscape, because the perception at the moment, people don't understand the difference and they shy away, and the communication is literally, as a financial institution, as a bank, as an example, won't actually send that type of information currently. So I think as evolution happens, that will change, but that's going to be gradual steps before they get to that.
Yeah, and in the enterprise side, when we speak to brands alongside the aggregators as well in the wholesale, I think having that logo and tick does really resonate from the conversations that I've had, especially the logo, because if you get, even as a consumer, if you're getting a long number or short code from, you're very likely to assume it's spam these days. People are very mindful. It's in the news all the time. It's a very current issue. But if I get something from, for example, EE with that tick, and you get the comms, I'm getting comms through on my channel all the time from EE like that, and the customers are I think they're much more likely to respond and engage with that kind of communication rather than your black and white SMS experience.
Yeah. I mean, to add to that as well, Catherine, I think the other thing that's probably not spoken of as much is the actual read receipt that you get from RBM as well. It's really powerful in that actually people can now take their SMS that one step further and know that actually something's been read. That holds a lot more weight depending on the actual type of communication you're having with the client themselves. But that can lead to follow-up decisions as to what the next step is in the communication journey itself. So there's a lot more in terms of where it can go. And, the most basic messaging itself will give you that. So instantly it's a win for businesses to take it.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk a bit through then the life cycle of messaging. So I think let's move back on with the presentation, allow you to carry on for a few more slides.
Yeah, so and I think this is just kind of reiterating the point without kind of dwelling on this on too much detail. Really, it's really reinforcing the point about you're using the right channel at the right time, and it had whatever the channel may be, there's a role for mobile communications at any point in that customer life cycle, whether it be through initial engagement, whether it be through that sales and that sales funnel into the conversational commerce, and also then into customer retention. There is a role for mobile, and I think if you talk about mobile as the channel, kind of going back to that point, irrespective of the channel, there's a role for mobile. And then if you layer on, well, what is the right expectation of the consumer and the expectation of the brand in terms of the content that can be delivered, the messages that need to be sent, and the degree of trust and verification that the consumer wants in that channel, then you can start to understand what is the right channel to choose, and that becomes the responsibility of the likes of ourselves and others in the room. Not necessarily the responsibility of the brand to say it needs to be on this channel, or to a certain extent, making sure that we're allowing the consumer and their capabilities and their preferences to guide that.
Well, I love the dream. I have to say that's something sounds awesome.
There's far more built in this slide than I ever expected.
Is there? What is it?
I get RSI on my thumb, I think.
Right. Catherine, do you want to talk to us a bit about the future?
Yeah, sure. So this one, I actually did this one in a presentation last week with a few brands in the room, and it went down very well, because I think what we need to move away as an industry from comparing it RCS to SMS, because it's not apples for apples. I mean, it's just we can give essentially an app-like experience on the modern mobile. As you can see there, you know, in 1992 it was completely different. It's like 30 years old. Customers just expect so much more from their communications, and that's obviously why BT have invested in RBM as a channel with Google. And I think I just use this to show them that, because I think a lot of the time we get people from brands that are just working with messaging, and we need to move the conversation out to digital marketing agencies, innovation specialists, and they can really get to grips with this technology in a way that people who are just selling SMS don't. And I think that's something we're trying to move into, and we're doing on the enterprise side of the business as well. And I also think that 18 million people in the UK is a really, really strong number when you think about that in terms of digital marketing paradigms. So as of the last time I checked, it's probably gone down. There was 18 million Twitter users in the UK, and brands don't hesitate to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on campaigns like that.
Probably do now.
Yeah, yeah, I will. I should probably update that, talking about what I know about. Yeah, you know, they were spending lots and lots of money on Twitter, and also TV campaigns. I mean, Nick has some really interesting slides to show what the actual engagement is on a TV campaign these days, but they spend money on that. And there is the attention value that we hear about from messaging and the eyeballs you can get in a campaign like that isn't just like SMS. And then, you know, EE has about 30% of their customers, and that's something that customers want to get updates on all the time because it's their mobile phone bill on a monthly basis most of the time. They have about 30% on their app. And that's, again, they could hit that again with something that's basically the same as an app with an RCS campaign. And that's why I want to try and move those conversations away from grey text as a link and then showing the RCS experience, because it's just not the same. And that's why I just want to use this slide to illustrate where we were.
Yeah. Amazing stats.
Yeah. And yeah, this sort of draws on that again. I talked to them a bit about, you know, I think some of the brands that we've been talking to recently, things like travel companies, what they do for social media advertising through influencers on Instagram and things like that. If an Instagram influencer had 17 million followers, they'd be like an A-list celebrity, and they're going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on a campaign like that they don't get the same analytics on that they might get an RCS campaign right into the palm of their consumers. And when we're talking to the brands, we just want to, I like talk about educating them on the newest rich message channels. Just as Dave said, we want to say to them, we can provide this. Don't worry about how we're going to provide it. We may want to use fallback channels, RBM obviously being the top one, but we may want to fall back to other channels to give them a very similar experience. And we align the fragmentation of their internal teams and strategies and show them that we can deliver to what I think your slide said, 95% of the market. And then show them the ROI of those campaigns, which we all know in the room is so much higher than the campaigns that you see, and not SMS, but across the whole digital marketing strategy. So my vision for 2023 would be to talk to some digital marketing specialists or marketing people and say, move 15% of your budget to RBM, see where it takes you for your marketing spend, and let the results speak for themselves.
Great chat. Are you, I mean, I know Orange Spain, I think, did a fairly visible campaign. We're selling Samsung phones. I think you guys have done similar, or are you finding that actually demonstrating how to use RBM to sell your products is that
well,
working?
I mean, I just wanted to add this one in. I think I've spoken at events before. This is actually from 2019, and the market's come a long way since then. And EE are obviously pushing RBM campaigns out to our own customers, and you can see how it looks there on the screen. It's a delightful experience for customers rather than SMS. And this one was quite a trial, small trial that we did. So we put this out on SMS and email as well, I think, and RBM accounted for 5% of the audience that was targeted for that particular campaign. But what really interested me for this one, it was 21% of the sales, and that wasn't the most sophisticated RCS campaign. It was pushed out to a website. You know, there was the tap in rather than type in, and the imagery, which really captured the imagination of customers and increased sales for that particular campaign. And when we show this to the brands that we speak to directly, they do sit up and take notice, definitely, when they see how it actually looks.
Do you think that's part of the strategy at the minute, is demonstrating in-house how we can use these tools in various organizations?
Yes.
With our own customers, so they're almost seeing this is how you use it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think to go out and say you need to use this, especially in the enterprise, and not be able to show use cases within EE itself. Although BT has many departments, as I've learned in the last year and a half, but it is really, really important, and they like to see us using the technology and benefiting from it as an organisation as well. And we're continuing to roll that out.
Fantastic, thank you. I think we've got last couple of stats.
This steps nicely into kind of the next section, really, which is then talking about kind of enabling a simpler route to market. Because I think we can often, and this has probably been since the day dot of mobile, we can be guilty of talking ourselves into familiarity with something. I remember talking about QR codes back in the mid 2000s, and everyone saying that use them now, and it's only really 10, 15 years later that there's any real consumer familiarity with that. So we are in danger to a certain extent of talking about kind of rich messaging and the opportunities and convincing ourselves that it's the norm. We're actually out in the enterprise world. That's a big step from what they're currently doing. So we do see some really interesting case studies. We do see some really interesting trials. And we do actually see some new entrants where it's a new use case that the business may be building. So they're not working with anything legacy. They're stepping into something, which is much easier. Yeah. But obviously, when you're talking to an enterprise that's already doing something, that already has a retail store that's sending out notifications, changing what they're doing there is far from straightforward for them.
And I think that when Tim showed that business messaging right up to conversational commerce, basic message right up to conversational commerce, that's what we need to do. Get the gateway, show them what they can do with a simple read receipt and verified sender, and then build out those campaigns. And that crawl, walk, run approach to RBM, I think, seems to be the way forward. Because I think a few years ago we were guilty of building out these incredibly sophisticated demos that were hard to execute in reality. So that's where I'm hoping that we're working with our aggregator partners and on the enterprise side of the business to push RCS out in that way.
Yeah, we're starting to see. Well, I mean, we are starting to see some good case studies out. I think it's fair to say. We are approaching time, aren't we? So I'm just conscious of giving people a choice.
So coffees are out there, but I think this is so engaging, and also we've got 2 more sessions. So it's you can grab a coffee and come back. But should we do questions first?
Yeah, can do questions.
Whatever.
Dave, is there anything I know we have a few more slides left.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you wanted to cover off before we?
I think just kind of really trying to touch on this as much as humanly possible in the 30 seconds before I get something thrown at me.
No, Dave, carry on is my point. So you continue.
It's really about, and this is, we talked. I think Nick had a slide that looked at that journey, and we talked about it here. And Craig talked about it yesterday as well in terms of taking brands on that journey, which is where the basic message is really, really nice, because it's a compelling proposition. It's the text you're already sending at the same price, but verified, branded, read receipts, link previews. It's really compelling. So it's very hard to say, well, no, why wouldn't you? And as a business, you get all the benefits that you'd expect. And what we and our partners can, others in the industry can enable is how we can make that really straightforward for brands. They don't even need to change anything. Get an RCS agent enabled and verified, and actually we'll take your SMS as you are currently sending it to us, and where we can deliver as RBM, we will. And where we can't, we'll continue to send it as SMS. That's something we offer now, and we've actually got a brand that will be launching with that in the next week or two, which is going to be really exciting. It's a high street retail brand that's going to be sending out their delivery notifications via basic message, which is, I say it's really exciting for us, but I think it's also really positive as a case study to show to the market it can be done, and look at the benefit you can get from it.
Yeah, so you can imagine, kind of as a consumer, that first day when consumers are starting to get messages where it's got a picture of the brand, and it's all the verification that comes with it, and they didn't have to do anything to do it. It's hard to imagine that not steamrolling from that point forwards.
I think to Catherine's point earlier about where we started with all of the bells and whistles demos that we were trying to talk to brands about, whether directly or through our partners. This offers that opportunity. There's much less friction. There's much less objection from a brand, where all they really have to do is exactly what they're doing now, but provide a logo, and they get a read receipt. So there's that verification, rather than asking them to work to create campaigns when we want to be able to do this quickly and prove the model.
And am I right? Did I hear you say it's the same price for a brand as well on this? So although we don't get caught up in detail of pricing, for the brand, it's largely they're not going to see a huge change in what they do. It's purely working with their aggregated partner to perhaps change the imaging or.
Yeah, so, well, from a network point of view, the pricing for basic message is on parity at the moment with SMS as part of the overall Google incentive. We're supportive of that. We really want to see people getting that benefit. We want to start the conversation moving, obviously, towards the full solution conversational pieces.
Well, it's hard to come up with, like I say, hard to have an argument as to why you wouldn't, if that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about that a bit yesterday, and again, there is a danger that we fall into, well, why wouldn't you? So it's really compelling. But then there's a lot of brands that haven't. Because actually, kind of putting yourself in the position of the brand also, there is still a, why should I? If SMS is working, we talk about, low effort. There is still effort. There is still a business case to build internally. There's probably a product manager because SMS is typically, the kind of use case we're talking about. It's not the core product. Might be our core product, but it's not their core product. It's a notification. The core product is selling clothes, for example. So actually, changing part of that process needs a number of conversations internally. So as a business, sometimes it can be, well, yeah, but that's still feels like a risk. So how do we make sure it's as easy as possible? And that's about, one, how we position it, but also two, about how we make sure we're targeting the right kind of use cases. And I think that's where, and again, Craig touched on this kind of really importantly yesterday, is looking at it as a stepping stone. I think that there absolutely are those use cases where we can take SMS and port them over to basic message. But I also think that the kind of the more compelling ones, where you've got you can better take the brand on a journey, as we say, well, you can do this easily now, but look at where you can then take it in the future. So if you think about those delivery notifications that maybe say, if you need to reschedule your delivery, click here, and it pushes you to web where you need to go and log into your form and do that. What happens if that's done conversationally? So it becomes, yes, I'd like to change my delivery. When would you like to change it? Tomorrow, the day after? And then it gives you time slots that are capable. That becomes a really kind of compelling and really interesting use case. But if you start there, the brand's not going to go there because that's a big change for them.
Have you broached the conversation from a P2A point of view of things like that, though? It effectively becomes a blank check use case because you don't know how many times people are going to do it. Have you had to tackle that?
I'll just say on the P2A side, we don't charge for P2A. So from our perspective, P2A is you might discover the brand somewhere, you might send a message. As a user, you won't pay for that, and as a business, you won't pay to receive that message. You'll only pay when you respond. So you have control of that. We're very mindful of. There's a few things you comment on. First of all, the basic message SMS thing. The whole idea is from our ecosystem bit, nobody pays any more and no one earns any less. So it stays the same. Obviously, from a brand and a business, they should be getting advantage of that. So they may make more money because they get more conversions from that, et cetera, et cetera. And then we want to sort of continue that and make sure that we've got as much. We're trying to improve things rather than make anything worse for anybody. So the whole idea is that everybody's going to kind of win here and make sure that happens.
Well. Again, a really, really interesting conversation. I think we've got a couple more slides, I think, before we wrap up, and then we'll give everyone a chance to grab a
picks up a couple of the things we talked about before, and actually looking at some of the stats that Nick showed yesterday about actually you mentioned earlier, Tim, in SMS isn't going to go away. It's absolutely not going to go away. It will still be there. But I think what we need to identify is there are definite current SMS and future SMS use cases which are ripe for being delivered via RBM. But actually, there's a whole load of more use cases that are from other channels that are ripe for RBM. And I think that's where it becomes really a lot more interesting with brands. And this is very much future thinking. But what are consumers currently having to do via email or via an app or via a web or via a call center where we can use RBM to support those use cases? And that's where this becomes a really kind of really exciting place to be in. But there is a degree of patience because we can talk about it and we can present about it, but actually we need the brands to come with us, otherwise it's meaningless. So we need to take them on that journey, and that does need a degree of patience. But I think we're putting in place some really good stepping stones to get them there.
Would you say as a panel from what you see of the industry, with these last couple of years, we've seen almost people being forced into using messaging in certain use cases. Has that has that helped us, this journey that we're trying to take everyone on? Is it helped, or actually now we're sort of, we're starting to see the COVID era starting to level out a little bit? Actually, has it changed buyer personas or what people's acceptance of messaging channels?
Well, I think there's a degree of adaptations that starting on the brand side they've had to make, which you don't undo those adaptations, that evolution. And I also think on the consumer side, I can't remember the figure, but you repeat something 20 times, it becomes habitual. So if consumers have been behaving in a way with brands increasingly so for the last 2 years because they've had to, well, that becomes one in place on the brand side and two more habitual on the consumer side. And when you see the drive and the increase in capabilities across mobile channels, where there is that that kind of that really positive competitive nature between the channels to what they can offer, I think that becomes really, again, more compelling. So I don't see there being a step backwards. I think what becomes interesting is how we start to, again, and I think it's an industry thing. I think that we need to start to really be identifying, well, where can we make sure we're working, dare I say, outside of the industry, and grab those use cases from outside of the industry and say, actually, these are done on mobile, because we know that if you haven't got it in your hand or it's not on the desk in front of you, it's in your pocket or in your bag right now.
One final sort of closing question for you on this one then. So we're sort of heading towards a future where we're creating quite a lot of brand presences here. How are you working with brands at the moment for them to let their customers know about these services or the extra things that they're starting to offer?
I'm going to throw the grenade to Kim on this one, because he's far closer to me.
Thanks. I guess it just depends, really. I mean, awareness-wise, you can do it in multiple ways, and sometimes you can just use the traditional channels that you're already communicating with your customers on. So whether that's email, whether that's SMS, you can have a link which pushes through into these other new channels themselves. Vice versa, you can also advertise it within your own applications, web services on a contact us, rather than it popping up with a live chat. Actually, it could be a push through straight into the rich channel itself. So there's loads of ways you can transition those types of interactions to make your users aware. Will they go full blast? Hey, we're now live on RBM. Please contact us, or WhatsApp, whatever the channel may be. No, the truth is they're going to want to let the users find it themselves and create their own adoption to those types of channels, because they want to take small stepping stones, because they don't know how it's going to react and how they're going to handle that on a mass. We do know we're heading to a recession, so the adoption rate is going to increase because businesses are going to be looking to control how they manage their costs and more effectively. One head should be able to handle a lot more in terms of engagement, and automation be able to take care of some of the other layers. So we've got to look at all the components that make up that type of system, not just the interaction itself. So yeah, that's hopefully all right for you, Mike.
Well, yeah, fantastic. I think we are in an interesting, where a lot of our A to P based use cases, we were telling the consumers as we sort of head into this world of with bots and very engaging systems. It's going to be an interesting change. Let's open it up to questions from the audience. Have we got anyone with any questions for the panel today? I can see one at the back, two in the room there at least. Whoever gets the mic first wins.
Hi, very engaging discussion. Thanks a lot for the comments and the insights. I had a couple of questions. First, one is for Catherine, and you compared the RCS campaigns from related to TV or Twitter, which are mediums brands use for advertising. Do you provide any way or a solution for brands to advertise on RCS? Because brands are trying to put advertising money getting new customers from Twitter or TV. How do they get new customers from RCS?
Well, that's, I think, going to be part of the strategy as I discussed it. We need to expand out beyond traditional SMS A2P use cases, because RCS has given us the technology that can do that, because it's a much richer experience which we can use for marketing and advertising. And I guess simply speaking, A2P SMS, quite a lot of it is advertising and marketing use cases. So we can move those across, but also expand on that with the features that we have, and speak to other actors in the industry that might not be aware of this technology. I would say if we went into Cannes Lions to all the marketing and advertising agencies, hardly any of them would even know this technology existed, and it's at their fingertips now, ready to be used. And that was just the point I was making on that one.
I think it's worth kind of highlighting that the RBM, importantly, is not tin channel.
Yeah.
So as opposed to something like TV or Twitter and the like. So where consumers, shall we say, have less control over what they're seeing.
Just to add to that, we have actually done campaigns for a large fashion retailer, which started out on a social channel and then basically using the power of an influencer, brought it into a rich channel. So actually it turns from a group-wide conversation where actually the footprint's there and the exposure can be generated, and then move to a one-to-one type conversation. So it's basically using the right combination to create that meaningful conversation.
Thanks. And just another question I had for David here. You mentioned about entry points in your presentation. What role have entry points been playing in rich channels like WhatsApp and others, and what role have you seen them play in RCS?
Sorry, can you?
You mentioned about entry points.
Entry points, yeah.
Entry points. What roles have entry points played in driving traffic on rich channels like WhatsApp or RCS? Can you compare them? Performance of entry points on WhatsApp versus RCS?
I think the challenge on P2A work for RBM is obviously the discoverability. So I think there's, for the most part, the vast majority of traffic that we're seeing at the moment is A to P, if we're honest. So in terms of being able to compare across the two, there's probably limited that we can do at the moment.
I mean, it's probably worth adding, though, that's all down to preference as well. So what you're trying to do is create, so if someone's visiting a website and it's a P2A type application, they click a chat type option. If you present them with multiple options, they're going to choose what's personal to them and then pick that particular channel. So there's no real specific stats, but it is opening up options there.
I think it's just about meeting the customer where they want to be it pushing out the traffic out to them or else engaging. And that's, I guess, the beauty of this strategy that I've discussed today.
Thank you.
So it was the back of the room there, sorry.
Yeah, so just in case you don't know, I work for Orange. And for those who know me, I've worked in this space for a very long time. My tenure's been very long and very hard. And I have many hats in my role for Orange, but one of my industry roles was to work at the GSMA level with all the other operators specifying the RCS standards. And I mean, I'd have to say, and it's no surprise, as MNOs, we individually are very innovative, we're very creative. However, due to many factors, we don't invest and we don't deploy in time. Situation with the OTTs, they get there before us. So, and we had our own attempts with RCSE, etc. like that. But then Google came along in 2017, and I would say it was great because they were there as an enabler to make the dream come true when it comes to the evolution of messaging, particularly SMS. That was 5 years ago. And great presentation yesterday by Craig showing all the updates in Android messages, but that's P2P. Okay. Fabulous that all it is, you want to engage the user in the area, and all these fabulous way of communicating via media content keeps them engaged, keeps them favorable to the space. Now we also had WhatsApp today. Okay, now WhatsApp, obviously, they have been bought out by the corporate Meta. However, to me, they showed how they still had that startup mentality. And why I say this is because very quickly they created a separate application with the business for messaging promise. And yes, their feature set for the P2P was once great. It's perhaps a little bit behind with what we can do in Google now, but they are innovating in the space for chatbots. And even the chatbot experience may not be quite as slick as we have it in Google. They don't have carousels, they don't have buttons, but they have some other really interesting points. Now, coming back to the standards, 2017, we introduced the chapter on chatbots, and we had a representative from Google in there. And with all our creativity, we realized and specified lots of interesting features. And I don't want to take too much time, but I want to highlight two in particular, one small and one big. One small that we did then that we still don't have now in Android messages is the integrated web view. Now, you saw when they were showing the WhatsApp experience, the customer stayed within the client throughout the entire end-to-end journey. You did not lose the customer. However, today in Android messages, once they click on an action button to go out to a browser, you may not get them coming back. That's an issue. The second one, big one, and we're talking about the success here. It's all about the user experience for me. Those who know me know this is what I bang on about. Okay, we want customers. Yes, the A2P is great, but this is the brand contacting me when they need to. What about when I have a need of a business? Where do I go to? Where do I look for my, accommodating my needs? Google's great at this. They have search. Yeah, they do it very well. They serve the customer really well, but they do not currently accommodate that need in the RCS client because we don't have P2A. And WhatsApp, guess what? They're already delivering P2A as we saw earlier today. So we specified this all 5 years ago, that
So
Google was doing the dream and we're going to put it all in.
If I can perhaps answer the first couple of points there. So I think you made some great points. They are, and again, it's so critical that we're thinking about some of these future points. And I think A2P, like you say, we've got, I think everyone on the panel would feel fairly comfortable that A2P, we've got a good plan. P2A, you're absolutely right. If the future comes to pass that we're all working towards, we are going to need something. And I think, we'll see how the next few weeks and months goes, see if anything drops in our laps to solve that problem.
I would just say, Asher, you're not being unheard.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And Craig is in the room here, and he's flying back to Mountain View on Friday, and he's writing it all down.
Brought his flight earlier.
Right. Thank you ever so much to the panel. Thank you very much to the for the questions and to the audience. Everyone, please do go grab a coffee and look forward to the next. No, we're straight into the next one. We're going to go. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.